What's happening, everybody? It's Trey here, joined again by my dad, Sean, and today at Reactions to the Classics, we're going to be taking a look again at The Doors, this time their fourth album, The Soft Parade. We've done reviews of their first three records, enjoyed those, and now we're up to this. And if this is your first time stopping by the channel, we appreciate it. Here at Reactions to the Classics, we take a look back at some of the most classic records of all time and do reviews of them. And just like today, it's usually the first time we've heard the album. So if that sounds like something interesting to you, be sure to hit that big red subscribe button down below, and you can also check out our Patreon and Facebook groups in the description. But all that to say, let's dive into the quick facts.
Yeah, Trey already mentioned it. The fourth studio album, released in July of 1969, peaked at number 6 on the US charts, but did not chart in the UK at all. It was recorded between November 68 and June 69 at Electrosound West in LA. Without any album material to work with, producer Paul A. Rothchild, who by this time was addicted to cocaine, took control of the recording sessions, kept having them do retakes. Their first album cost $10,000 to make. This one, $80,000. This one was not liked by their hardcore fans at the time or the critics. They had been touring around, exhausted off the success of their first three albums. They had already worn out all of Morrison's poetry, all of his songs that were written, so they come in the studio, they have nothing to put down. Rothchild tells them, we got to take it a totally different direction. Let's do brass, let's do horns, and that's kind of the direction they went.
Yeah, and through 68, Morrison became a little bit more anxious, and his love of recording with the Doors started to wane a little bit. He had other loves such as filmmaking and as well as his poetry, of course. And so he actually wanted to leave the Doors, but Manzarek said, hey man, let's just get through the Soft Parade.
Let's get through the album, man.
And then we'll see what happens.
Manzarek and Densmore were all on board for the jazz. Jim kind of had to be talked into it, and the songs on here that he wrote as solo songs, you're going to be able to tell that because they sound more like traditional Doors stuff. Morrison demanded the band receive individual writing credits after initially refusing to sing Krieger's lyric, "Can you see me growing, get your guns," on the first track, Tell All the People. As a result, this was the first album with band members separately rather than collectively as songs by the Doors. Krieger actually wrote half the songs. He had to really step it up because, as you mentioned, Jim didn't want to be there, and Jim's substance abuse problems started to become a huge deal on this album.
Well, we're going to start the record off with Tell All the People. This was released as a single, only reached 57 in the United States, and this, again, points back to what you were just talking about with the line about, you know, picking up your guns. It almost has a anti-establishment vibe to it. The narrator's essentially saying, if you're going to follow me, we're just going to keep getting bigger and bigger, and essentially can rise up. Right away, you notice the brass.
15 seconds of brass starts this album, like before there's any lyrics. If you were a Doors fan back during this time period, I'm sure you put this on and went, what is going on?
Yeah, and Morrison kind of has a little bit of soul in his voice, a unique delivery. I enjoyed this.
Yeah, I thought it wasn't bad at all. It took me aback, obviously, when I heard that first part, and I'm like, all right, we're into something different here. But it takes us to the second song, which is much more widely acclaimed, Touch Me, which is written by Krieger. There's not very many lyrics, but it's notable for its extensive use of brass and string instruments, including a solo by featured saxophonist Curtis Amy. Ray Manzarek actually played the harpsichord and the organ on this. It reached number 3 in the US charts, their last top 10 hit. Morrison actually had a very difficult time on the day of recording this because he was so drunk they said he couldn't even stand up. So they kind of held him up and then let him sit down. You can't tell it by listening to it. I'd actually heard this song just a couple times, maybe in movies, maybe in a documentary, but when I heard it, I'm like, yeah, I kind of know this song.
I thought that the Curtis Amy on the saxophone was fantastic.
Agreed.
Here, mixed between that and the keyboards just made for a really sweet sound. And essentially here he's saying, I'm going to love you until the, heavens stop the rain. So pretty much for all time, this is a standout on this record. And then we go into the next track, Shaman's Blues.
And this one was written solely by Morrison. You can tell at the very beginning because it starts out with the organ and it sounds like it belonged on any of their other 3 albums. By this point, Morrison had become tired of his fans, disdainful of them, and like maybe he was telling himself it's time to give up the act and just go back to being Jim. It has an interesting part at the end, a spoken word part, which they actually mixed together just by different things Jim said in the studio. He was ad-libbing and they mixed it all together. So it's an interesting way to end the song. I'm not real crazy about the song. It's not horrible, but the sound is definitely distinctively different than the first two tracks.
Yeah, and here playing off of what you were saying about maybe this is almost written to and about himself.
Right.
It says that can somebody stop the pain? There's nobody that's ever going to be able to do the things that you can do. So I think there's maybe a little bit of validity in that interpretation. I didn't enjoy this as much as the first two tracks, but it still had some highlights musically for me. And then that'll take us to the fourth track, Do It.
This is one that was written by Morrison and Krieger. It's very repetitive for me. It's just a so-so song.
I wasn't too crazy about it. I did pick up that it had maybe a little bit of a connection to our opener. Tell all the people. He says in here, please, please listen to me, children. You are the ones who will rule the world. Telling them all to follow him. So who knows? I think here the highlight really is Dinsmore and his drumming.
Agreed.
He's very solid in this. Not a standout track per se. And then we go on to another track that I'm not too crazy about.
Easy Ride. And this is another one that was written just by Morrison. It just starts. That was one of the striking things about the song. He just starts singing. There's no intro to it musically. It almost sounds country in the middle of it.
That's what I wrote on my notes. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, wow, this is a totally different direction. Once again, just so-so for me, but it does sound distinctively different than the other songs, so they got to get a little bit of kudos for that.
Yeah, I don't have much to add. Essentially, he's lusting after this girl. It's more upbeat and that country type of flair to it. Then that's going to take us to Wild Child. This opens up the B-side. This was written by Krieger, and this has a lot of different interpretations. It's about a child who's going to be the savior of the human race. It mentions that they're a wild child, not like, really well received by the mother or the father. Who knows? Could that be about Jim himself? I don't know. But here, I thought we had some unique things instrumentally, some nice reverb, a great melody, and then at the very end, there's just a funny line in there. Do you remember when we were in Africa or something along those lines?
Yeah, I just found it to be a little odd too. And I had the same thing in my notes. Very instrumental. I think Krieger wrote it. Krieger's definitely not a singer, although he does sing a little bit on the next song. So I think the songs he wrote, a lot more instrumentally based. It was fine for me. It wasn't anything.
Yeah, this three track run in the middle was definitely the low light, because I think we start off the record well and end it well.
Yeah, we do. So that takes us to Running Blue. This one was co-written by Krieger and Morrison. It's a tribute to Otis Redding, who Jim greatly admired. Otis had died in 1967, just before a show in San Francisco, and was replaced by the Doors. At the concert itself, Jim made a tribute to Otis, singing to the crowd that would later become the intro of the song. He said, "Poor Otis, dead and gone, left me here to sing his song. Pretty little girl with the red dress on. Poor Otis, dead and gone." Once again, this thing starts out with Jim just singing, no instrumentals. It's an interesting song to put on here.
Yeah, this one was full of energy. Getting my negatives out of the way on it, I thought that the singing portion and the chorus with Krieger was not very good.
It wasn't that great.
I wasn't a fan of it, but the song was full of energy. I liked some of the callbacks to Otis Redding. We have a line in there about got to find the dock of the bay.
Yeah, I thought that was cool.
Obviously, Otis Redding's most famous song. We introduced the brass back into it after the last few tracks. We start to close out the record with Wishful Sinful.
This was written by Krieger. Follows the elements of classical music that a lot of his songs have on here. For me, this thing was, once again, for just a so-so song.
Yeah, I thought it was decent, not on the upper tier per se, but I thought that the imagery here was good. We have very vivid about the sun, the wind, the water being, cleansed by it, yet it's called, talks about sin a lot, so kind of oxymoronic. So a decent track, and it goes into the longest song, 8.5 minutes, self-titled "The Soft Parade," which is has a progressive rock type of flair to it.
It's definitely adventure.
In the sense that we shift tempos and styles quite a bit. We start off in a spoken word piece where Jim's acting like he's an evangelical preacher from back in the day, former seminary student, petitioning to the Lord in prayer. And then we get into a more soft guitar section.
Yes. Then it goes into a harpsichord-driven piece, mainly known as Sanctuary, with lyrics such as, "Can you give me sanctuary? I must find a place to hide." Probably referencing his then current problems like the Miami and New Haven arrest. Jim was in a little bit of trouble at this time. Afterwards, it kind of picks up, goes faster, almost psychedelic pop. Goes upbeat, then there's a soft section before going into a wild blues part that ends the song.
Yeah, there are some interesting lines in here.
Very.
He talks about the man at the door Could be, again, bringing in the theme of establishment, since Jim had undergone, like you mentioned, arrest earlier in that year just for, antics at his concert.
Yes.
There's a funny line in there about Jim's talking about there's 4 things that essentially kind of give you reasons to live, and the final one was hilarious. One is to love your neighbor till his wife gets home.
Yeah.
I dug that one. It did keep you on the edge of your seat because they kept shifting styles. So.
It's like they just threw a bunch of stuff together and it's 8.5 minutes long. Like none of it fits with the rest of it, but somehow it just all works when we mix it all together.
Yeah, he also mentions all our lives we build and save as we just prepare for a shallow grave. And then towards the end, it kind of reminded me from Waiting for the Sun closer, 5-1. It was almost like a rally cry, getting more and more energetic and ready to rock. This and Touch Me would be my favorite tracks. I do tend to like these longer epic tracks that they do. So, and this took up almost a fourth of the entire runtime of the album.
It did for me. Touch Me and this song, The Soft Parade. That'll take us into our overall grade. What'd you think of this?
I didn't like this as much as the previous 3.
Oh, I didn't either.
There were times where I really enjoyed the brass instrumentation in here, and then towards the middle of the album we stripped that away and just kind of had some more basic filler tracks, I would say. And with only 9 songs on here, when 3 or 4 are just kind of middle of the road, it drags down the rest of the record. That said, there's still some that I added to my playlist, and you could still see some of that great Doors sound and lyrics that you grow to know and love. So I'm going to be at a 6.75 on this.
Yeah, I kind of just echo what you said. I didn't hate it or anything. There isn't any songs that were horrible, but for me, everything you said, I enjoyed the different brass on there. If I would have got it brand new at that time, I probably wouldn't have. No wonder people had a little bit of an outcry, but listen back to it all these years later, it works, it's different. And there are varying musical styles on here, as we mentioned. Like, the songs don't necessarily fit because they weren't written cohesively.
Yeah.
Jim wrote a couple, then Krieger kind of wrote a bunch of them on his own, and Jim helped him on a couple at the end. And so there's just no cohesiveness, and it's all over the place, which sometimes works. Here, not quite as much. So I'll give it a 6.5.
And that'll do it for today. Let us know what you think of the Soft Parade down below. And as always, Dad, appreciate the research.
Enjoy it.
We're coming up to Morrison Hotel next, which a lot of people have been telling us, that that's one of their best albums. So I'm excited for that. And if you enjoyed this video, be sure to hit that big red subscribe button. We upload multiple times a week in a variety of genres. And until next time, y'all, thank you so much for watching. Happy listening, and we will see ya.